All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. Mitchell Trubisky. Man, let's before we really get into this topic, just tell me, what was your reactions to seeing him play in that first game?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think my reaction mainly from it is I don't know, how much we really learned. I think that he kind of came out and he kind of had a bit of a two-faced game, right? I mean, he wasn't awful, in the first three quarters. He had his moments. There was kind of the deflected ball that almost should have been picked, but, wasn't completely his fault at the same time. But he wasn't amazing, and then in the fourth quarter comes around, and they're kind of playing, just like we've brought up so many times, they're playing in an offense that really favors Trubisky. Utilizing the hurry up, playing a more faster paced offense that Trubisky always seems to find comfort in, and then he goes out there and has an amazing passer rating, throws three touchdowns, and leads the Bears on the comeback. So you kind of got the best, and not quite the worst, but not the best from Mitch in that first game. But I think it really just kind of goes to show you that when Nagy is calling plays that kind of are more tailored to Trubisky and his game, then things tend to go right. And I know that this Lions matchup is favorable for him, but at the same time, I think it was more of the almost a situation that brought out that great fourth quarter.
Yeah, so Mitchell Trubisky, I mean, honestly, I think that he looked slightly improved, but I agree with you when you say that we really haven't learned too much about him yet. He was this has to be one of the funniest stats that I've probably ever seen, and it's something that we talked about all offseason. Not only was he top 3 in the lowest graded passes by PFF in week 1, but he was top 2 in highest graded passes in week 1. So that completely inconsistency, that's what we've been talking about. Trubisky, when he is on, he is on. He can perform with the top quarterbacks in the league. But man, if he could just eliminate some of that low playing, even if those bottom, most lowest graded passes can go to like mid grades or, slightly below average grades, we have a completely different quarterback on our hands. It looks like through the first and second quarter, it seemed like there was a lot of miscommunications, and I don't know how many of those were necessarily Trubisky's fault. Obviously, it looked like Jimmy Graham jumped really early on a throw that he probably could have completed that was in stride. And then also Allen Robinson dropped one, I believe, in the end zone in that quarter too. So it could have been 2 touchdowns for us there. But then again, Mitch also missed a touchdown pass to Demetrius Harris. That was wide open in the back of the end zone. So it was on everybody really in the beginning. Like, it was not just Mitchell Trubisky. He definitely could have had a 5 touchdown game yesterday. And it was, he could have had 6 touchdowns if he didn't make his mistake too. So this Bears offense, though, looking a little bit better. The only really egregious play that I saw from Trubisky was him almost getting intercepted by that outside linebacker on kind of a rollout to the left. That was pretty brutal, but he came back and threw a nice touchdown to Javon Wims against the grain, and that looked pretty. That was pretty nice to see from him. And hey, Mitch said in the beginning of the game, this is something we talked about continuously in this offseason. He said that the Lions came out with a lot of not man coverage. So they played zone for most of the game, but as the game started heating up, they went to switch back to some more man schemed concepts. And Matt Patricia came out and said that they weren't necessarily all man at the end. There was a lot of variation as well, but we still saw Trubisky really dice up the man coverage secondary in the fourth quarter, and hey, maybe have a little bit of some issues diagnosing the more creative coverages that Matt Patricia was throwing out there in the first 3 quarters. The first 2 quarters I thought he played good. The third quarter I thought he played horrible, and then the fourth quarter I thought he played great. I think that he's missing less. Like, I think that his misses are in a smaller region of error. I think he looked a little bit uncomfortable still, but as the game heated up, he looked like he got his comfort level back.
Yeah, and that brings up the point, was it just kind of like him easing like into the game, with their no preseason, with how just kind of training camp just led into the regular season, was it kind of just like getting warmed up to like full speed play, So I almost feel like this coming coming week against the Giants is kind of, again, it's kind of just another test. It's almost kind of like, okay, now hopefully this game can kind of answer our question, because I don't know how much we can really take away from week one other than, that he led the Bears to a victory. So you kind of have to write it off as an overall positive. Now, just kind of regarding the Bears' offenses in general, I thought like in the late first quarter, early second quarter, I really like how that offense looked. That they were kind of operating out of the play action a lot, kind of mixing it up, kind of hitting different spots and depths of the field, getting some kind of mid-range passes in there, and then also running the ball pretty effectively. I mean, Montgomery had some good runs. Tariq even had a decent run up the middle. So I think it was kind of like the pace and the balance that I really wanted to strike with the Bears offense, and they kind of eventually lost it. Like you said, the third quarter was just really, it was bad for just about everyone on the offense. It didn't look pretty. But, I don't really know where that went, and to me it's kind of like, oh, okay, look, I feel like Nagy kind of knows what this offense needs to look like, but then we kind of go inside and out of it, and it worked. It was effective in the late first quarter, early second quarter, both those drives. They went just about the length of the field, but they weren't able to cash in. They had to just kick the field goals, which ultimately, we talked about that extensively in the lead up to the game as well, is that the red zone efficiency needs to be better. And, of course, as the game kind of moved on, I don't know, they were hitting passes outside the red zone. The game-winning pass to Miller was, I want to say, maybe he threw that from like a 30.
Yeah, like a 30-yard.
So, I mean, they kind of avoided the red zone in that case. But, yeah, I mean, I'd say that, the offense in general, which, I feel like we're going to be talking about most of the time. I mean, there's some things to go over with the defense as well. But the offense, it was, we're kind of still waiting for more, So,
yeah,
it's kind of both with Trubisky and the offense.
So there were a couple overall net positive from last year, by far. Like it looked much better than last year, but last year should not be the benchmark we're looking at. That is not a good. Being better than last year isn't being that good. But really, I think that if the offense was just clicking like a little bit better, some throws were like, it just looked like there was some just like minor issues through the first two quarters that led to a lot of field goals or touchdowns. I mean, I told you we could easily had 3 touchdowns there. It's so funny because I see on Twitter and a lot of national media analysts saying, oh my God, the Bears, they shouldn't have even won this game because Matthew Stafford, the player completely missed in the end. We had 2 of those. Like, I mean, it wasn't as egregious. It didn't look as bad, but there was 2 easy touchdowns that we left on the field because our playmakers didn't make a good play on the ball. So I don't really buy that. It's just because it happened at the end of the game. I get it. But pretty much like as far as Mitchell Trubisky goes, I'm having a difficulty really benchmarking where to compare this performance to, because if you look at it, and we talked a little bit about this last week. If you look at it, he's played really well against the Lions historically, and that's not a huge, step up, right? Like his performance is literally on par with every other performance he's had against the Lions. 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I think that's what he's put up against the Lions for the past 3 times he's played them, almost exactly. So it's not out of the ordinary to see this type of game from Mitchell Trubisky against the Lions, right? Or we can kind of benchmark it towards the first game of the season, because Mitchell Trubisky has played awful in the first couple games of the season. Him and the rest of the offense has played, really bad. I tend more to lean towards benchmarking it towards the first couple games of the season, because last year we played really bad against the Denver Broncos, who are not a good team, in the first couple games of the season. That Denver Broncos team was much worse than this Detroit Lions team. And then also, even with Green Bay, 2 years ago, at the first week of the season where we gave up that huge lead, we kind of that wasn't that good of a team either. They didn't have a great performance that year either. So, I mean, honestly, I'm hoping that this is showing a little bit more signs of life on offense, and we'll just continue to get on, higher cylinders as we continue to play. Maybe this week we can see an actual really competent performance from Mitchell Trubisky. But, I'm still very skeptical, but it's one of those situations where it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Mitchell Trubisky, neither way, he was going to leave this game being considered a good quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, Mitchell Trubisky, I'm happy for him. I see some immaturities in him still that he needs to work out, some difficulties maybe diagnosing coverage, but overall, this has got to be one of the most smooth games I've seen from Mitchell Trubisky in a very long time, if ever, truthfully.
Yeah, I think this is, going back to your like week one or first couple weeks benchmarking. I think this is the best start that he's gotten off to in the Bears offense, along with that. And, next week, coming up with the Giants should be more of the same. It's kind of a very favorable start. I mean, we talked about that, but and so I think that the Bears shouldn't have much trouble in this coming week either. It's kind of when you get down the schedule, when they do meet up with teams, like the Packers, they will, put up 42 points in this past week or 40 something. They also gave up 30 something, so it's kind of take what you will with that. But when they are playing, those better teams further down in the schedule, and we'll see how the Buccaneers are looking at that point too. Maybe they'll be clicking. So once we kind of get further into the schedule, I think that's kind of when we need to see these offensive improvements more. I think they can afford some slip-ups next week too. I'm not particularly scared of the Giants. I don't think they're necessarily as bad as everyone is making them out to be. But I think that, hopefully they can use these first couple weeks to kind of tune up, get ready. And by the time we're in week 4, week 5, we're kind of seeing an offense that has an identity. I mean, it'd be nice to have an offense that not only has competence and moving it down the field, but also has an identity. Because I mean, you look at the defense. The defense has an identity. People know what comes with playing the Bears defense. But when you're playing the Bears offense, it's kind of, they're known for struggling. I mean, that's their identity right now.
Yeah, and that's actually, I really like that word that you use, and it's something that Matt Nagy even consistently hit on talking about, going into week 1 last week. Just the entire fact that the Chicago Bears, last year, they just looked like random play calls. Like Matt Nagy was just, taking a little piece of paper out of a hat, and that was the play call he was going to go with. And this year, we unfortunately saw that in the third quarter for a little bit. I think through the first and the second quarter, it wasn't that bad, except for that first series, which was horrible in my opinion. I think that we are going to see some sort of identity, and I think that identity is, developing the game through the run, even though Matt Nagy still probably didn't run as much as he should have this past game. Developing the game through the run, and then also using creative, play action, and then also just under center plays from Mitchell Trubisky. I think that Mitchell Trubisky, one of the reasons why I believe we see Mitchell Trubisky have such good fourth quarter performance is because Matt Nagy has no choice but to play call for him like he's not scared to play call for him, right? And that's something we talked about last year. It looked like Matt Nagy was scared to play call with Mitchell Trubisky. He was throwing all these screens, and I think that Matt Nagy has a little bit more confidence in him. Even in the third quarter, even in all through the quarters of the game, it felt like Matt Nagy wasn't operating from this position of my quarterback is working against me, and I think that's huge for the Chicago Bears.